to my second video on this channel. Today I'm going to be discussing English literature and revision tips for English literature. Over the course of my English lit I went up 3 grades, so I know some revision tips that definitely helped me. Today my tips are split into 2 sections. The first section has 3 tips just about content and how to revise the content, which includes books, poem, etc, etc. The second section discusses more about how to answer the question. This includes 7 tips because this is what most people struggle with. As long as you know the rough basis of the book or the poem that you're analysing and have a few quotes, then you're all set to go. You don't need to go too in depth with quotes and remembering, and that's what I did, which was my mistake at the start. It's mainly about answering the question and also the structure of your answer. It's really important to go over these because this is what gets you top marks and it makes your point really clear. I'm just going to jump straight into the tips. So I'm going to start off with content. The first tip is what you kind of do already in class. You analyse and annotate your book. You need to read it, find a key quote, then organise it into one of your several themes. Have your themes all written down on a piece of paper. You then find a quote and then you write it down and write what scene, what act, whatever, and then you explain it, and then you've got a clear viewpoint and you've got your starting point there where you can go back to it and explain it more. Once you've got all your quotes down, you need to pick out a few which are really key, because you're not going to be able to remember like 10 different quotes or more than 10. I'd say 3 max. You need to really analyse, really go in depth with those quotes. You need to be confident. That's going to get you the more marks. It's going to show you as a better writer. The second tip, which I'm going to talk about, is Mr. Bruff. Mr. Bruff is a YouTuber and he does the best videos, honestly. He is one of the main reasons why I did really succeed in my English. It's just the way that he speaks about the analysis and the plots and the themes is super important. Mr. Bruff does both the books that you have to study and does the poetry questions. Although his videos are really long, they're about 50 minutes, a lot of it you don't need to know, a lot of it you learn in class. For example, context. He covers about 20 minutes of context and it's not necessary. Context is really important in your lit exam, but as long as you know basics, then you're fine. You don't need to know everything, because it's not necessary. You're not going to write pages of context. You need to just reference it once or twice in your exams and then you're fine. I'll show you more about what I did with Mr. Bruff in a minute, because I'm going to get my posters out, and that shows all the character analysis, everything you need to know, and it took me about, what, 30 minutes, maybe even less, because the video is quite short. Overview of what I just said. Mr. Bruff is really good. Definitely watch his videos. Only take in what you need and what you don't know. My third tip is posters. This is so exciting. I love posters. I will show you some of my posters which I did for my English Lit GCSE, and I will explain them a bit more because the way that I started out my posters were really helpful. It made me understand the content so much more. Posters, around my posters. This is my bag with all my English lit books. So it turns out my mum threw away most of my poetry posters. I still remember what they look like and what they said, so I could explain that later. But for the moment, the only posters which I have are from the books that we were assigned to study for GCSE. This included In Spectacles, Macbeth and Christmas Carol. Okay, I'm going to start off with character analysis. This is in Spectacles. This is probably the most efficient way to revise from a poster. For example, this is a storyboard that I created on Inspector Ghoul. Guys, so I am editing now and I noticed that you can't see any posters like that well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a Instagram account for this YouTube channel, and on there I'm going to upload the pictures from my posters, and hopefully you can get a bit more of a grip on what I've been writing and what the analysis consists of. Follow that Instagram, it'll be linked in the description, and have a great day. All the green highlighted bits are the bits where our key quotes. So I get that it has a lot of quotes, maybe a bit more than it should, but it's a really efficient way if you want to learn how a character develops over time throughout a story. The line represents time. I feel like teachers, they don't actually show you how to revise. They just give you the content and then just say go over that through flashcards or something and you'll be fine. But I feel like this is a really good way because a lot of exam questions, they talk about the development of a character. For example, Scrooge and his redemption, and Sheila and her moral education. This is a very common question, and these posters are a really good way of showing character development, as I said earlier. But yeah, I don't really know what else I can talk to you about it. Go through the book, definitely. You'll have to read the book at least a couple of times, or if you follow the tip that I gave you before, if you write down a character, then what happens, key moments, key quotes, and this will be really easy. Like, that is super useful. You don't have to keep referring back to the book, and that's what I had to do, and so it was really time consuming, and that's not what you need when you're revising. You want it to be quick, you want it to be easy, you want it to be efficient. These are just more examples. So I did it pretty much all the characters in spectacles. This is Sheila. Sheila I went pretty crazy on, considering she was such a key character. A lot of it is just analysis, so don't look at this and think, wow, that's like a lot. And you've got Eric's one here. I also did it the same with the Christmas Carol. This isn't a character analysis, it's a storyboard. This is what I was talking about earlier. It is Mr. Bruff's analysis. This is from the video what you've got the themes and you've got key quotes. It's just like conversations. I will link Mr. Bruff's video to this in the description if I can find it. What's really important as well, which Mr. Bruff covers in his video, is how ambition leads to Hamartia, and I know that I reference this a lot in my own piece. I actually have some screenshots of my answer because I got to take some photos of my paper. I mentioned Hamartia and hubris a lot. Hubris means excessive pride, and Hamartia means fatal flaw leading to downfall. That's really important. I mentioned that in my answer and my teacher ate that up. I don't really know what else I can talk to you about my posters because I just sort of showed you the layout. I can talk to you about my poetry ones. Basically, I wrote down the poem, what the context was on one side, then I wrote down themes, and then I'll put all the key quotes there. That is pretty much it, because poetry is quite straightforward. You just need to know a few quotes, then really go in depth analysis. You just really need to research those quotes. Okay, so now I'm going to be focusing on the structure of how to answer a question. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the opening. I'm not going to be talking about the whole structure, but I'm just going to be giving you tips on things that I found when I came to writing my essays. First of all, opening. What's really important is that you need to reference the question and the theme that you're focusing on in the question. So I actually have my exam paper on here. I don't think I'm going to have to show you, so I'll just read out a little bit, which is the opening, just to sort of give you a basis on what I'm talking about. And the question was, how does Shakespeare present Macbeth as violent? So I said, Shakespeare presents the character Macbeth as violent and brutal throughout the play. The violence begins once Macbeth is exposed to the witch's prophecies, but it continues to worsen when his wife manipulates him into becoming a cruel and savage tyrant in aim to unleash his true masculinity. Just in the opening, I've referenced two themes, and I've talked about the violence, which was referenced in the question, and I've talked about how it develops over the time. So I say how the witches started it, but then Lady Macbeth is the person that makes it develop, and that's what caused his violent behaviour. Throughout my paper then, I'm going to explain those few key points along with the quotes that I've chosen. So as long as I have a few quotes that go with the themes that I just explained, which links to the violent behaviour, which was in the question, then I'm going to get good marks because I have a clear point. I'm going to show evidence to back it up, and that's going to show my clear understanding of what I'm talking about. Because what I found is that I didn't really know how to start an opening, so then I'll just write down loads of stuff and it'll freak me out because I don't know what I'm talking about. As long as you have the opening sorted, you're fine. In terms of poetry, it's literally the same. It will give you a poem and it will ask you to talk about another poem of your choosing and talk about how that represents a certain theme. So it could say how exposure and Storm on the Island show power of nature. Exposure shows the danger of the cold and how it easily just takes control. Storm on the Island also references that. It shows how it attacks living spaces, how it invades you. So that just shows power of nature. But now if I was writing it out in exam, I need to show quotes which I've pre-prepared in my revision time that show my points, and that's what gets you the marks. Second point is sort of links to the first point. Make your point clear and show a lot of evidence to back it up. I sort of explained that in my first point, so I'm just going to leave it there. Third tip is make sure you're referencing the poet/author. Also make the examiner aware that you understand that the characters are just characters in the book. A lot of examiners see people writing about the characters as if they were real. That turns the examiner off, makes you look confused. Just make sure that you're saying the character Macbeth, blah 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 this, and also reference the author quite a lot. My fourth tip is context. I'm gonna actually show you a snippet of what I wrote about context because I think I linked it in quite well. So this is back to the same question: how is Macbeth shown as a violent character? Shakespeare hoped that by introducing a disloyal king would influence James I to acknowledge the importance of kingship and the importance of not being a ruthless leader. You see there I've linked the story and the context behind the story. It sums up your statement. So it's really important as well. A really high percentage of your marks goes to context. So also mention the contemporary audience quite a lot. I think I did that. This is at the start of the play when Macbeth is fighting for Scotland. The audience would interpret his violent nature with pride as he's fought for his king and he's also fought for Scotland. And it doesn't need to be a whole page of context because I feel like Mr. Bruff goes way too in depth. I mean, you don't need it. I got really good marks for that and it's not like a lot. I'm just going to say this quickly. My fourth tip, use time wisely. Unfortunately, in my exam, I didn't use time wisely. I focused a lot on the first question. I got really high marks on my first question, but lost over half my marks on the second. You need to focus on the question that you're writing, but you can't focus too much, otherwise you'll lose track of time. You don't want to get ahead of yourself, you know? I said I was going to do 9 tips, but I think I've only got 8 here. So my 6th tip is focusing on technique. This includes circular text, metaphors, and explain and analyse why the writer has done this. This is the same with poetry as well. There's a lot of meanings behind language features and language techniques. This is what I wrote, just to give you a basis, because I feel like if I just tell you, it's not going to give you a really good idea on what I'm talking about, so I'll just show you. This shows a circular structure as the play began with the hero fighting an enemy and it ended with Macduff fighting a tyrant. Shakespeare ended with the death of Macduff and aimed to show the consequences of regicide but also show the result of a leader becoming a tyrant. Shows the technique, and then I've said why he's done this. So that's just a quick example, but there are a lot of language features within all the things that you're studying, so you really need to go in depth. They're probably one of the most frustrating things to revise as well because you can't always figure it out. That's why I do recommend Macduff because Mr. Bruff, because he's really good with explaining those things. My 7th tip is link with other themes and show how that may influence the original theme in the question. And that's what I talked about earlier and how I said in my own answer that violence, and then I mentioned masculinity and tyranny. It shows the examiner how you can pick out things and how good your understanding is of the play or the poem. And it's really good because if you can't remember a quote from your theme that you're given, you can just link it with another theme and then give a really, really good quote and it gets you the marks, trust me. My last tip, I'm super tired, is plan and really go in depth and explain what your point. Try not to get confused. This is what I talked about earlier with the opening. Really analyse the stuff. Do really go in depth because it shows your understanding. In terms of answering the question, there's a lot of planning that needs to go into it. But as long as you do that and as long as you follow the tips that I've given you, you're going to excel and do really well. Anyway, guys, that was it for this video. I hope this has been useful and I hope that I haven't hurt your brain too much because there was a lot. I know that lit exams are really intimidating, but honestly, if you stress, it's not going to do yourself any good. So just relax, watch a Mr. Bruff video and you will do fine. I hope you do really well with your revision and any of your mocks. If you have any further questions, leave them in the comments because I will get back to you. and I will do videos about anything that you need. Please like and subscribe if you want, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.